Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
The mashed potatoes felt heavy in my hands as I passed the bowl to my brother Jake. Our family Thanksgiving dinner in Columbus, Ohio was supposed to be perfect, but something felt wrong. I looked across the mahogany table at my parents, David and Sarah, both 58, and nervous about something. My girlfriend Rachel wasn't here because they didn't invite her. Again, I cleared my throat and asked the question that had been eating at me all week. Did the hospital send my surgery appointment confirmation yet? My mother fidgeted with her wedding ring while my father cleared his throat. Their answer changed everything. They did, but we used your surgery money for Jake's 21st birthday celebration. He only has one birthday a year. I slowly placed my fork on the ceramic plate, the metal clanking against the silence. So I guess you still don't know who really needs the surgery. Their faces drained of all color immediately. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked like a time bomb while I processed what my parents had just admitted. $12,000. Gone. Spent on my 21-year-old brother's birthday party while I had been working double shifts at the construction site, saving every penny for my hernia surgery that had been postponed for 8 months. My mother, Sarah, adjusted her burgundy sweater and launched into defensive explanations. Hilton, you have to understand that Jake needed this celebration. College has been so stressful for him, and 21 is such an important milestone. I watched my brother scroll through his phone, completely oblivious to the tension crackling around the dinner table. His girlfriend, Emma, a 19-year-old with blonde highlights, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She seemed to sense something that Jake was missing entirely. "Show him the pictures, honey," my father David encouraged, his graying beard unable to hide his guilty expression. Jake's face lit up as he held out his iPhone. "Dude, you should have seen Vegas. We stayed at the Bellagio for 3 nights. Look at this suite." He swiped through photos of marble bathrooms, king-sized beds with Egyptian cotton sheets, and room service that probably cost more than I made in a week. My hernia throbbed as I leaned forward to look at the screen. Every movement sent sharp pains through my lower abdomen, reminding me why I needed this surgery. For months, I had been unable to lift anything heavier than 30 pounds without excruciating pain. My job as a foreman required lifting beams and equipment that weighed 5 times that amount. "This shopping spree was incredible," Jake continued, swiping to pictures of designer clothing stores. "Dad bought me this leather jacket for $800, and Mom got me these Italian shoes that cost $600. Then we hit the electronics store." Emma's brown eyes met mine across the table, and I saw something there that looked like sympathy mixed with embarrassment. She understood what Jake didn't seem to grasp. "The new gaming setup cost $4,000 total," Jake continued proudly. "Curved monitor, custom-built computer, professional-grade headset, ergonomic gaming chair. It's all set up in my dorm room now." I did the math quickly in my head. Hotel, flights, meals, shopping, electronics, gambling money they'd given him. The total had to be close to $15,000, not 12. My stomach churned as I realized they'd spent more on a weekend than most families spend on a car. "And the best part," Sarah added with forced enthusiasm, was seeing Jake's face light up. "You know how hard he's been working in school. He deserved something special." My father David nodded emphatically. "Your surgery isn't going anywhere, son. It's elective. You can wait another few months while you save up again." Elective. The word hit me like a sledgehammer. I had been working overtime and weekends for 8 months, taking side jobs, painting houses, and fixing fences, all while dealing with constant pain that made me nauseated and dizzy. I'd been taking ibuprofen like candy just to get through each workday. "Jake's grades have been excellent," my mother continued. "Dean's List, 2 semesters in a row. He's studying business administration and economics. This celebration was an investment in his future success." I looked at my brother, really looked at him. Designer clothing from head to toe, expensive watch glinting on his wrist, hair perfectly styled with product that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. He was scrolling through more photos, completely absorbed in reliving his luxury vacation. My girlfriend Rachel was a nurse at Columbus General Hospital. She'd been pushing me to get this surgery for months, watching me struggle with pain that kept me awake at night. She wasn't invited to family dinners because my parents thought she was too serious for someone my age. At 32, apparently I was supposed to be dating party girls instead of professionals who cared about my health. The casino was wild too, Jake added, showing me pictures of poker tables and slot machines. They gave me $500 gambling money as part of the birthday gift. I actually won $200 more, Emma finally spoke up, her voice quiet but clear. Maybe we should talk about something else. Her suggestion hung in the air while I continued staring at my brother's photos. Pool parties, with expensive cocktails, 5-star restaurant meals, entertainment shows that cost hundreds of dollars per ticket. Every image represented money that should have gone toward fixing the injury that was destroying my ability to work and live normally. Hilton, my mother prompted, aren't you happy for your brother? I set my phone down carefully and looked directly at my parents. I'm curious about something. When you said someone else needs surgery, what exactly did you mean? The color that had been slowly returning to their faces disappeared again instantly. My father's fork clattered against his plate. My mother's hands began trembling slightly. Emma's eyes widened as she seemed to understand something that the rest of us were still missing. Jake finally looked up from his phone, sensing the shift in energy around the table. What are you talking about? David asked, but his voice cracked slightly. I smiled slowly, the kind of smile that appears when someone realizes they're holding all the cards in a game where everyone else thought they were bluffing. My mother's face went completely white as I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded stack of papers. The insurance documents and medical receipts that I'd found while helping them organize their filing cabinet last month suddenly made perfect sense. Dr. Anderson's office called me by mistake last Tuesday, I said calmly, unfolding the papers. Apparently, they had my number listed as the emergency contact for Sarah Williams' follow-up appointment regarding her abdominal CT scan results. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as she gasped. My father David stared at her in complete shock, his turkey dinner forgotten. Mom, I continued, reading from the medical records, you've been seeing specialists for 3 months. Severe abdominal pain, unexplained weight loss of 22 pounds, chronic fatigue, and night sweats. The symptoms started appearing in August, right around the time Dad lost his job. What? David exploded, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor as he stood up. Sarah, what is he talking about? What job? I haven't lost my job. Emma grabbed Jake's arm as he finally put his phone down, sensing that something serious was happening. The family dinner was unraveling faster than a cheap sweater. The oncologist's office, I continued reading, has scheduled you for additional testing next week because they're concerned about the mass they found on your pancreas. Dr. Rodriguez wants to rule out cancer before recommending treatment options. My mother began crying quietly, tears streaming down her cheeks as years of hidden fear and pain poured out. I didn't want anyone to worry. The symptoms weren't that bad at first. Jake's mouth hung open in disbelief. Mom, you might have cancer? The receipts show you've been paying for these appointments out of pocket, I added, pulling out credit card statements. Each specialist visit costs between $400 and $800. The CT scan was $1,200. The blood work was another $300. David slumped back into his chair, his face gray with shock. Sarah, how could you not tell me? How could you handle this alone? Because you've been so stressed about work, she sobbed. And Jake's college expenses are so high. I didn't want to add more financial pressure when we're already struggling. Emma spoke up softly. I'm a pre-nursing student. Those symptoms together can indicate pancreatic cancer, but they can also be caused by other treatable conditions. Early detection is crucial. My girlfriend Rachel chose that moment to call my cell phone. I answered immediately, putting her on speaker so the whole family could hear. Hilton, I just got off my shift. Rachel's voice filled the dining room. I talked to Dr. Rodriguez's nurse about your mother's case. She said the family needs to understand that waiting longer for follow-up testing could be dangerous. Pancreatic masses require immediate attention. Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at Rachel's voice coming through the phone. I'm sorry I haven't met you properly, Rachel. I know Hilton cares about you very much, Mrs. Williams, Rachel replied professionally. I've reviewed your symptoms and test results that Hilton shared with me. The good news is that many pancreatic masses are benign, but the bad news is that without insurance coverage, the diagnostic procedures you need could cost upwards of $20,000. Jake's face went pale as he finally understood the magnitude of what was happening. $20,000? For tests? The surgery to remove a mass, if needed, could cost anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000, depending on complexity, Rachel continued. With proper insurance, the patient responsibility would be much lower, but without coverage, my father's voice was barely a whisper. Sarah, why didn't you tell me about losing the health insurance? Because you've been lying about losing your job, she replied through her tears. I found the termination letter from the automotive plant in your truck. You were laid off 6 months ago, David. The COBRA payments for health insurance were $1,800 per month, and we couldn't afford them after you stopped getting a paycheck. The room erupted in shocked silence. Emma held Jake's hand tightly while he processed that his entire family had been lying to each other for months. The birthday money, I said slowly, wasn't the only money you spent. You've been borrowing against the house to pay for Mom's medical bills and Jake's college expenses while pretending everything was normal. David nodded miserably. The second mortgage is $47,000. We're behind on payments. Jake stood up abruptly, his chair falling backward. You spent $12,000 on my birthday party while Mom might have cancer and we're losing the house? Honey, we wanted you to have one perfect celebration before everything fell apart, Sarah explained through her sobs. We thought maybe I'd get better on my own, or David would find work quickly, or we'd figure something out. Emma's medical training kicked in as she asked practical questions. Mrs. Williams, when was your last appointment? What exactly did Dr. Rodriguez say about the next steps? He wants to do an endoscopic procedure next week to biopsy the mass, Sarah answered. But it costs $8,000 up front, and they won't schedule it without payment. Rachel's voice came through the phone again. Hilton, I'm driving over there right now. This family needs immediate medical and financial intervention. I looked around the table at my broken family. My brother's face was streaked with tears as he realized his luxury vacation had been paid for with money that could have saved his mother's life. My father was crying openly, overwhelmed by months of unemployment and lies. My mother was trembling with fear about her health and guilt about hiding her condition. There's more, I said quietly. The insurance investigator called me yesterday asking about claims submitted under multiple policies using our family name. Apparently, someone has been filing false claims to pay for medical expenses. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows of our childhood home that was apparently about to be foreclosed upon. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing her navy blue scrubs from her hospital shift. She knocked once and walked straight into our dining room, carrying her nursing bag and a manila folder filled with papers. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, she said professionally. I need to examine Sarah immediately and review all medical documentation. Jake, please clear some space on the couch in the living room. While Rachel guided my mother to the sofa for a quick assessment, I spread the insurance paperwork across the dining table. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Dad, I need you to explain these, I said, pointing to a stack of claim forms. These are insurance claims filed under 4 different companies, all using my social security number and employment information. David's hands shook as he picked up the papers. I learned about it from Bobby Henderson at the plant. Before we both got laid off, he showed me how to file claims for treatments that were similar to real ones. Small amounts that wouldn't trigger investigations. Emma gasped as she read over my shoulder. These claims are for physical therapy sessions, chiropractic treatments, and diagnostic tests. All things that insurance companies pay for without much scrutiny. The total amount is over $37,000 spread across 18 months, I continued. Every claim was filed using my personal information as if I was receiving these treatments. Jake paced back and forth in front of the fireplace, running his hands through his hair. Dad, you committed insurance fraud using Hilton's identity. He could go to prison for this. From the living room, we could hear Rachel asking my mother detailed questions about her symptoms and pain levels. Her professional voice carried a sense of urgency that made my stomach clench with worry. "The collections notices," I said, pulling out another stack of papers, "show that you've been hiding over $43,000 in medical debt. These hospitals and doctors have been trying to reach you for months." David collapsed into his chair, looking older than his 58 years. After I lost my supervisor position at the plant, I was too embarrassed to tell anyone. I kept leaving the house every morning, like I was going to work, but I was really sitting in the parking lot at the library, filling out job applications online. "The credit cards," Sarah called from the living room, "are all maxed out. We've been using cash advances to pay the minimum payments on other cards." Emma's business background helped her understand the financial situation quickly. "This is a debt spiral. You're paying 24% interest on cash advances to make minimum payments on cards that charge 18% interest. The automotive industry layoffs affected 800 workers in Columbus this year," David explained miserably. "I'm 58 years old with a high school education. Nobody wants to hire me for anything that pays more than minimum wage." Rachel emerged from the living room with a grim expression. "Sarah's symptoms are consistent with pancreatic inflammation, but cancer can't be ruled out without proper testing. Her blood pressure is elevated, and she's dehydrated from not eating properly." Jake stopped pacing and stared at his parents. "Why didn't you tell me any of this? I would have stayed in community college instead of the expensive state university. I would have gotten a job to help pay bills." "Because we wanted you to have opportunities we never had," Sarah said, walking slowly back to the dining room. "College education opens doors that stay closed for people like your father and me." "The birthday celebration," I said, doing calculations on a napkin, "actually costs $17,000 when you include the credit card interest and cash advance fees. The gaming equipment alone had 12 months of promotional financing that turns into 31% interest if not paid off completely." Emma picked up Jake's designer leather jacket from the back of his chair. "This jacket could pay for 3 months of your mother's medication if we returned it." "Take it back," Jake said immediately. "Take everything back. I don't want any of it." "The return period expired weeks ago," David admitted. "The electronics can't be returned because they've been used. The hotel and flights are obviously gone forever." Rachel was reviewing the medical bills with professional efficiency. "The insurance fraud is a federal crime that carries a potential sentence of up to 20 years in prison, but Hilton could argue he was a victim of identity theft if he reports it immediately." "Wait," I said, a cold realization washing over me. "If you've been filing false claims using my information, what happens to my ability to get legitimate insurance coverage for my surgery?" The room fell silent as everyone understood the implications. My parents' desperation had not only stolen my surgery money, but potentially destroyed my ability to get medical care legally. "The insurance investigator," Rachel continued, "told me that they have surveillance footage of family members entering medical facilities that were supposed to be treating Hilton." "The investigation is already underway." Emma's face went white. "Surveillance footage? They've been watching you?" I pulled out my phone and showed them a voice message from an unknown number. "Mr. Thompson from National Insurance Investigations called me this morning. He wants to meet tomorrow to discuss irregularities in my medical claims history." Jake sat down heavily on the couch. "We're all going to prison, aren't we?" "Not if we handle this correctly," Rachel said firmly. "But it requires complete honesty from everyone and immediate action to minimize the legal consequences." Sarah began crying again. "Hilton, I'm so sorry. We never meant to hurt you. We were just scared and desperate, and we made terrible decisions." "The house?" I asked. "How far behind are we on payments?" 3 months, David answered. "The foreclosure notice comes next week if we don't catch up. That's another $4,700 we don't have." The grandfather clock chimed 8 times, marking the passage of hours since this Thanksgiving dinner had begun with my innocent question about surgery appointments. Our family had completely imploded, revealing layers of lies and financial desperation that I never suspected. "There's something else," I said quietly, pulling out one final document. "I know why you really used my surgery money, and it wasn't for Jake's birthday party." Emma burst into tears the moment I held up the medical bill from Pine Valley Psychiatric Hospital. Jake's face went completely white as he recognized the paperwork that he thought had been destroyed. "Hilton," Emma sobbed. "Please let us explain before you get angry." I read from the bill while my parents stared in shock. 72-hour psychiatric hold, followed by 14 days of inpatient treatment for depression, anxiety, and prescription drug addiction. Patient Jake Williams, age 21. Total cost, $11,400. My mother's hands flew to her chest as she gasped. "Jake, what is this? When did this happen?" "The dates," I continued, "show he was admitted 3 weeks before his birthday. The Vegas photos on his phone are from last year, aren't they?" Jake nodded miserably, unable to speak. Emma moved to sit beside him on the couch, holding his hand tightly. "The birthday party story was a cover," Emma explained through her tears. "Jake tried to kill himself on October 15th. He'd been taking prescription painkillers for months after a sports injury, but it turned into addiction when he couldn't cope with college pressure." Sarah screamed and rushed to her son, wrapping him in her arms while he broke down completely. "Oh, honey, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you come to us for help?" "Because I was failing everything," Jake sobbed against his mother's shoulder. "My grades were terrible. I was stealing money from my roommate to buy pills, and I couldn't face disappointing you again." David sat frozen in his chair, staring at his son in complete shock. "What do you mean, disappointing us again?" Emma answered when Jake couldn't. "He's been on academic probation for 2 semesters. The Dean's List story was a lie. He was about to be expelled when the suicide attempt happened." Rachel immediately moved into nursing mode, checking Jake's pulse and looking into his eyes for signs of current drug use. "What medications are you taking now? Are you still having suicidal thoughts?" "Dr. Martinez has me on an antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication," Jake answered quietly. "I see her twice a week for therapy. Emma's been driving me to all my appointments because I was too ashamed to tell Mom and Dad." I looked at Emma with new respect. This 19-year-old girl had been managing a crisis that my parents knew nothing about, while Jake was spiraling toward a complete breakdown. "The prescription drug addiction," Emma continued, "started with Percocet after Jake hurt his back playing intramural football. When the prescription ran out, he started buying pills from other students. When that got too expensive, he started stealing." "Stealing?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "From his roommate, from the coffee shop where he worked, from my purse when I visited him," Emma admitted. "I caught him taking money from my wallet and made him tell me what was wrong." Jake's therapy documents showed the severity of his condition. Multiple suicide attempts that Emma had prevented, escalating drug use that required medical intervention, and academic failure that threatened his entire future. "The psychiatric hospital," Rachel said, reading over the treatment notes, "required immediate intervention to prevent another suicide attempt. This wasn't elective treatment. This was emergency medical care." My father finally spoke, his voice cracking with emotion. "Son, I had no idea you were struggling this badly. I thought college was going well for you." "I was terrified to tell you the truth," Jake explained. "You and Mom were already stressed about money, and I knew you'd sacrifice to send me to school. I felt like such a failure." Emma pulled out her phone and showed us pictures of Jake from 2 months ago. He was gaunt, hollow-eyed, and looked nothing like the healthy young man sitting in front of us now. "The treatment program," she explained, "included detoxification, individual therapy, group counseling, and medication management. Jake couldn't survive without it." I studied the psychiatric hospital bill more carefully. This shows insurance was supposed to cover 80%, but claims were denied. "Why?" "Because we'd already lost our health insurance when Dad got laid off," Sarah admitted. "We had to pay the full amount out of pocket." "So, you took my surgery money to save Jake's life," I said, finally understanding the complete picture. Emma nodded through her tears. "I'm the one who suggested it. I knew Jake needed immediate help, and there wasn't any other money available. I thought maybe we could figure out a way to replace it before you needed surgery." Rachel was reviewing Jake's current medication list. These prescriptions cost approximately $400 per month, without insurance coverage. The therapy sessions are another $600 monthly. "I got a part-time job at the campus bookstore," Jake said. I'm trying to pay Emma back for everything she spent helping me. She used her entire college fund to cover my medical expenses that insurance wouldn't pay. I looked at Emma with amazement. You gave up your college savings to help my brother? I love him, she said simply. When someone you care about is dying, you do whatever it takes to save them. My parents were holding each other and crying as they realized how close they'd come to losing their son without ever knowing he was in danger. The Vegas story, I asked. How did you maintain that lie? I had photos from spring break last year when some friends went to Vegas, Jake explained. Emma helped me create social media posts that made it look recent. We even bought some of the designer clothes from thrift stores to make the story believable. The academic probation, Rachel asked. What's the status of that now? Dr. Martinez wrote a letter to the university explaining my medical situation, Jake answered. They've agreed to let me restart this semester with a clean slate if I maintain my treatment program and pass all my classes, Emma added. He's been attending every class and meeting with tutors. His professors have been very understanding about his situation. I realized that while my parents had been lying to protect their pride, Jake and Emma had been lying to literally save his life. The motivations were completely different, even though the deception felt similar. The suicide attempt? I asked gently. What triggered it specifically? Jake took a deep breath before answering. I'd failed my midterm exams, been caught stealing from my roommate, and realized I was completely addicted to painkillers. Emma was talking about breaking up with me because my behavior was scaring her. I felt like everyone would be better off without me. I found him in his dorm room, Emma whispered. If I'd been 10 minutes later. The room fell silent as we all contemplated how different this Thanksgiving would have been if Emma hadn't saved Jake's life. The treatment program helped me understand that addiction is a medical condition, not a moral failure, Jake continued. But it also helped me realize how many lies I'd been telling and how much pain I'd caused people who cared about me. Sarah hugged her son tighter. We should have seen the signs. We should have been paying attention instead of hiding our own problems. Rachel's medical training provided valuable perspective. Depression and substance abuse often escalate when family systems are under stress. Jake was probably responding to financial and emotional pressures that he didn't fully understand. I looked around at my family, finally seeing the complete picture of how everything had fallen apart. My parents' financial crisis, my mother's health scare, and Jake's near-death experience had all collided during the months when they were too ashamed and scared to be honest with each other. But there's still one more thing, I said, pulling out the final document that would explain everything. The insurance fraud wasn't just about paying for medical bills. You were trying to create a paper trail to justify the money that had already been spent. The document I held in my hands was a life insurance policy application with my forged signature, dated 3 weeks after Jake's hospitalization. My parents had not only stolen my identity for medical claims, they'd tried to take out a $50,000 life insurance policy on me. Dad, I said, my voice barely controlled. You applied for life insurance on me without my knowledge or consent. That's not just fraud, that's conspiracy to commit murder in the eyes of the law. Emma screamed, and Jake jumped up from the couch in horror. Dad, what the hell did you do? David's face turned gray as he realized I'd discovered the most damaging evidence yet. Hilton, it's not what you think. I would never hurt you. I just needed collateral for a loan to pay back the insurance companies. The signature, I continued, is an obvious forgery. Look at this. I held up the policy application next to my driver's license. You didn't even try to match my actual signature. Rachel examined the documents with her analytical nursing background. This shows premeditation and escalation. You moved from filing false claims to identity theft, to insurance fraud involving life insurance. Each crime carries heavier penalties. The insurance investigator, I said, pulling out printed emails, sent me copies of surveillance footage from medical facilities. There are videos of Dad entering physical therapy clinics and chiropractic offices, pretending to be me for treatments that were then billed to insurance companies. On my phone, I showed them photographs that Mr. Thompson had emailed me. Clear images of my father walking into medical buildings, signing in under my name, and receiving treatments that were charged to insurance policies I'd never authorized. The total fraud, Rachel calculated from the paperwork, exceeds $73,000 across multiple insurance companies. This is organized criminal activity that crossed state lines when you filed claims in Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Emma was reading through the evidence with growing horror. Mr. Williams, you used fake addresses in 3 states to make it look like Hilton was receiving treatments all over the region. The life insurance policy? Jake asked. What was your plan with that? David buried his face in his hands. I thought if I had a large policy on Hilton, I could use it as collateral to get a personal loan to pay back the insurance companies before they caught us. Then I'd cancel the policy, and nobody would ever know. Except insurance companies investigate suspicious policy applications, Rachel pointed out. A $50,000 policy on a 32-year-old construction worker with no dependents would have triggered immediate scrutiny. I spread out bank statements that showed the scope of their financial deception. You opened checking accounts in my name at 3 different banks. You've been depositing insurance fraud payments into accounts that I supposedly control. Sarah was crying hysterically as she realized the extent of the crimes her family had committed. Hilton, we never meant for it to go this far. It started with one small claim to pay for my first doctor's appointment. The paper trail, I continued, shows that this started 10 months ago, long before Jake's crisis. You've been systematically defrauding insurance companies to pay for basic living expenses after Dad lost his job. Emma found more evidence in the stack of papers. These credit card applications were also filed under Hilton's information. You've opened 8 credit cards using his social security number and employment history. The credit cards, Rachel said, checking the statements, have been used for groceries, utilities, car payments, and Jake's college expenses. This wasn't just medical fraud, this was identity theft to maintain your lifestyle. Jake was pacing frantically. Dad, you've destroyed Hilton's credit and potentially his entire future. Construction companies run background checks. If he gets charged with fraud, he'll lose his contractor's license. The house, I said, isn't 3 months behind on payments. According to these foreclosure documents, it's been in default for 8 months. You've been using insurance fraud money to make partial payments to delay the seizure. David finally looked up, his eyes red with tears and shame. I was drowning, son. Every month, the bills got bigger and the income got smaller. I didn't know what else to do. You could have asked for help, I said angrily. You could have told the truth about losing your job. You could have applied for assistance programs or unemployment benefits. I was too proud, he admitted. 58 years old, and getting fired from a job I'd held for 22 years. I felt like such a failure. Rachel was taking notes about the legal implications. The insurance investigator told me that they've been building this case for 6 months. They have evidence of coordinated fraud across multiple companies and states. What does that mean for Hilton? Emma asked. If they charge him as a co-conspirator instead of a victim, he could face federal fraud charges carrying up to 20 years in prison and hundreds of thousands in fines. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of the legal jeopardy I faced because of my parents' crimes. There's more, I said quietly. Mr. Thompson told me that they've been monitoring our family's communications. Phone calls, emails, text messages. They know about Jake's hospitalization, Mom's medical condition, and Dad's unemployment. Jake's face went white. They've been spying on us? It's not spying when you're investigating federal crimes, Rachel corrected. Insurance fraud costs companies billions of dollars annually. They take it very seriously. I pulled out the final document that would change everything. This is a letter from Mr. Thompson. Delivered yesterday. The FBI is taking over the investigation because it involves organized fraud across multiple states. Sarah screamed and collapsed into her chair. The FBI? Federal charges, I explained, carry mandatory minimum prison sentences. Dad could face 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Mom could be charged as an accomplice, and if they decide I was involved instead of victimized. How do we fix this? Jake asked desperately. There has to be something we can do. Rachel and I had already discussed the options. There's only one way to minimize the legal consequences. Complete cooperation with the investigation, immediate confession of all crimes, and full restitution to the insurance companies. Full restitution means paying back $73,000 plus penalties and interest, Emma calculated. That could be over $100,000 total. The alternative, I said, is that we all go to prison and lose everything anyway. David stood up slowly, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. What do you need me to do? I looked around at my broken family, realizing that I was about to become the person who either saved them or destroyed them completely. Tomorrow morning, I said, we're all going to meet with Mr. Thompson and confess everything. But first, I need you to understand that I'm taking control of this situation from now on. I stood up from the dining table and walked to the fireplace, looking at family photos that now seemed like relics from a different lifetime. When I turned back to face my parents and brother, my voice was steady and determined. Here's what's going to happen, I began. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we're meeting Mr. Thompson at his office downtown. Dad, you're going to confess to every fraudulent claim, every forged signature, and every fake account you opened in my name. David nodded slowly, his face resigned to accepting whatever consequences awaited him. Mom, you're going to provide complete medical records showing the legitimate expenses that motivated some of these crimes. We need to establish that you were genuinely sick and scared, not just greedy. Sarah wiped her tears and nodded. I'll call Dr. Rodriguez's office first thing Monday morning. Jake, I continued, you're bringing all documentation from Pine Valley Psychiatric Hospital, your therapist's records, and proof of your current treatment program. The FBI needs to understand that part of this money genuinely went towards saving your life. I have everything organized in a folder, Jake replied. Emma helped me keep detailed records for insurance appeals that we never got to file. Rachel pulled out her phone and showed us her contacts list. I've already spoken with Lisa Bennett, a criminal defense attorney who specializes in white-collar crime. She'll meet us at 8:30 tomorrow morning to prep everyone before the FBI interview. The attorney fees? Emma asked practically. How are we going to pay for that? I had already thought through the financial realities. I'm taking out a second mortgage on my condo to pay for legal representation and begin restitution payments. The attorney said voluntary cooperation and immediate payment plans can reduce sentences significantly. Hilton, my mother protested, you can't risk your home to save us from mistakes we made. You already risked my freedom and future when you used my identity to commit federal crimes, I replied firmly. Now I'm choosing to risk my financial security to keep our family out of prison. David's voice was barely a whisper. What can I do to help fix this? Starting Monday, you're going to apply for every minimum wage job available in Columbus. McDonald's, Walmart, gas stations, grocery stores. I don't care if it hurts your pride. We need legitimate income to make restitution payments. I'll apply everywhere, he promised. I should have done that months ago instead of hiding and lying. Mom, you're scheduling the pancreatic biopsy immediately. Emma's going to help you apply for charity care programs at the hospital. If you die because we couldn't afford medical treatment, this entire nightmare was for nothing. Rachel was already pulling up hospital financial assistance websites on her phone. Columbus General has excellent charity care programs. With your current income and medical situation, you should qualify for significant discounts. Jake, you're withdrawing from college immediately and getting a full-time job to help with family expenses and restitution payments. Wait, Jake protested. I'm finally doing well in school again. My therapist says education is important for my recovery. Your education can continue after we've dealt with the legal crisis your treatment costs helped create, I replied. Emma, I'm assuming you'll want to distance yourself from our family once you understand the full scope of this situation. Emma stood up and looked me directly in the eyes. I'm not going anywhere. Jake almost died, and your family saved his life. I'm staying to help fix whatever I can. Her loyalty surprised me, but I continued with my ultimatum. The house is going into foreclosure next week, but we're not fighting it. Mom and Dad, you're moving into a 2-bedroom apartment that costs less than $1,000 per month. What about all our furniture and belongings? Sarah asked. Everything valuable gets sold to pay legal fees and restitution. The dining room set, Dad's tools, Mom's jewelry, Jake's gaming equipment, all of it. Jake nodded sadly. The computer setup can probably be returned for store credit. I never wanted it anyway. Rachel had been researching restitution requirements on her phone. The FBI typically requires payment plans that don't exceed 30% of family income. With minimum wage jobs and assistance programs, the payments should be manageable if everyone works. I'm also implementing new family rules, I continued. No more lies, no matter how small. Every financial decision gets discussed with everyone before money gets spent. All medical appointments include at least one other family member for support and transparency. Emma was taking notes on her phone. What about Jake's therapy? That's essential for his recovery and mental health. Dr. Martinez has agreed to see Jake at a reduced rate, and the University Counseling Center provides additional support at no cost. David looked around the house he'd lived in for 15 years. Losing the house feels like failing my family again. Dad, you failed your family when you chose lies and fraud over truth and asking for help, I said bluntly. Losing the house is just a consequence of decisions you already made months ago. Sarah was crying again, but they were different tears. Hilton, I'm so proud of how you're handling this crisis. You're showing more maturity and leadership than your father and I have shown in years. The FBI interview, Rachel said, requires complete honesty about every crime and every motivation. No minimizing, no excuses, just facts and accountability. What if they don't believe that Hilton was a victim instead of a co-conspirator? Jake asked. I pulled out my phone and showed them text messages I'd been exchanging with Mr. Thompson. I've been cooperating with their investigation for 2 weeks. I provided them with handwriting samples, work schedules that show I was on construction sites when medical appointments were supposedly happening in my name, and character references from my employer. 2 weeks? Emma asked. You've known about this for 2 weeks? I've been building a case to protect myself while gathering evidence about what you all did, I admitted. Mr. Thompson told me that early cooperation from victims often leads to reduced charges for family members. The grandfather clock chimed 11 times, marking how long this devastating conversation had been continuing. There's one more thing, I said. After the FBI interview and attorney meetings, we're all starting family counseling with a therapist who specializes in financial abuse and addiction recovery. Financial abuse? David asked. Dad, you stole my identity and committed crimes that could have sent me to prison for 20 years. That's financial abuse. Jake's addiction created a medical crisis that pressured you into criminal behavior. We need professional help to rebuild trust and communication. Rachel was nodding approvingly at my comprehensive plan. Family therapy will also help everyone process the trauma of this crisis and Jake's suicide attempt. The most important thing, I concluded, is that everyone understands this is the last chance. If anyone lies to the FBI, lies to the attorney, lies to the therapist, or commits any other crimes to solve financial problems, I'm done. I'll testify against you myself to protect my own future. Jake looked at his parents and then at me. Hilton, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that you're the best brother anyone could ask for. You're saving all of us. Emma hugged Jake tightly. Tomorrow, we start over completely. No more lies, no more secrets, no more crimes. David and Sarah held hands as they faced the reality of losing their home, facing federal charges, and rebuilding their lives from nothing. The surgery, my mother asked quietly. When will you be able to schedule it? I smiled for the first time all evening. Rachel arranged for me to see Dr. Peterson at Columbus General next week. The hospital's charity care program covers employed patients with temporary financial hardship. My surgery is scheduled for December 15th. Relief flooded my mother's face as she realized that despite everything they'd done to hurt me, I was still going to get the medical care I needed. Are you ready for tomorrow? I asked, looking at each family member. They all nodded, finally understanding that honesty and accountability were the only way forward. 6 months later, I stood in the backyard of my parents' small apartment complex, helping my father David set up tables for our family's second chance Thanksgiving celebration. The November air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of Emma's homemade apple pie cooling on the windowsill inside. Hand me that tablecloth, Dad said, his voice stronger and more confident than it had been in years. Sarah made this one herself in her quilting class. My father had been working as a shift manager at a local grocery store for 4 months now, earning $14 per hour and taking pride in honest work again. His manager had promoted him twice already, recognizing his reliability and work ethic. "How's the restitution payment plan going?" I asked, spreading the handmade tablecloth across the picnic table. "We're ahead of schedule," he replied with genuine satisfaction. Between my job, Sarah's part-time work at the medical clinic, and Jake's weekend catering gig, we're paying $800 per month, instead of the required $600. Mr. Thompson said we'll have everything paid off in 7 years instead of 10. Inside the apartment, I could hear my mother Sarah laughing with Rachel as they prepared our meal together. Sarah's pancreatic biopsy had revealed a benign cyst that was successfully removed through outpatient surgery. Her oncologist, Dr. Rodriguez, had become a family friend after helping her navigate the charity care programs that covered 90% of her treatment costs. "Mom seems healthier than she's been in years," I observed. "The stress of keeping secrets was killing her," Dad admitted. "Now that everything's out in the open, she sleeps through the night and has energy for activities she enjoys. The quilting group at the community center has become her favorite social outlet." Jake emerged from the apartment carrying a stack of plates, followed by Emma, who was balancing serving utensils and napkins. My brother looked completely transformed from the hollow-eyed young man I'd confronted at last year's disastrous dinner. "Hilton, wait until you see what I brought to show you," Jake called excitedly. He set down the plates and pulled a folded letter from his pocket. My acceptance letter to the Addiction Counseling Certification Program. I read the letter with pride and amazement. After working full-time for 6 months to help with family expenses, Jake had been accepted into a specialized program to become a certified substance abuse counselor. The program includes tuition assistance for students who commit to working in community health centers, Emma explained. Jake will be able to help other people who struggle with prescription drug addiction while completing his bachelor's degree. "Dr. Martinez recommended me for the program," Jake added. "She said my personal experience with addiction and recovery makes me an ideal candidate for peer counseling." Rachel appeared in the doorway, wearing an apron over her favorite blue dress and holding a golden turkey that smelled incredible. "Dinner's ready, everyone, and I have some news to share." We gathered around the small table that was a far cry from my parents' former dining room set, but felt warmer and more genuine than any meal we'd shared in that big house. "Before we eat," I said, "I want to say something to everyone." I looked around the table at my family, seeing faces that had been marked by crisis, but were now filled with hope and genuine happiness. Last year, we almost destroyed each other with lies and desperation. Today, we're sitting together as a family that survived federal fraud charges, addiction, potential cancer, and financial ruin because we chose honesty and accountability over pride and fear. Sarah wiped her eyes with her napkin. "Hilton, you saved all of us when you forced us to face the truth. I know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful every day that you didn't give up on us." "The legal outcomes," David said, "were better than we ever hoped for. Suspended prosecution in exchange for full restitution and community service has allowed us to rebuild our lives instead of serving prison sentences." Jake nodded emphatically. "The community service requirement led me to volunteer work that helped me discover my calling as an addiction counselor. Sometimes consequences become opportunities if you handle them right." Emma raised her glass of apple cider. "To honesty, second chances, and families that stick together through the worst times." "Speaking of second chances," Rachel said with a mysterious smile, "Hilton and I have an announcement." I took her hand and felt the new diamond ring that had been hidden under her gloves all morning. "We're engaged," I said, unable to contain my happiness. Rachel agreed to marry me last weekend. The table erupted in cheers and congratulations as my family celebrated our good news. Sarah immediately started planning wedding details, while David offered to help with any expenses we couldn't handle alone. "There's more news," Rachel continued. "The nursing program has offered me a position as a clinical instructor starting next fall. The salary increase means we'll be able to help with Jake's educational expenses and contribute more to the family restitution fund. And my surgery," I added, "was completely successful. Dr. Peterson said the hernia repair will allow me to return to full construction work without limitations. My contractor's license was never affected by the fraud investigation, because the FBI confirmed I was a victim, not a participant. Emma was crying happy tears. Look how much everything has changed in just 6 months. The family counseling, Sarah said, taught us that we're stronger when we support each other through problems, instead of hiding from them. Dr. Williams helped us establish communication patterns that prevent the kind of crisis we experienced last year. Jake's transformation had been the most dramatic of all. His addiction recovery, combined with steady employment and educational goals, had restored his confidence and sense of purpose. The suicide attempt, he said quietly, feels like something that happened to a different person. I understand now that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. The apartment, David said, gesturing toward their modest but comfortable home, costs less than half what the house payments were. We've learned that happiness doesn't depend on the size of your dining room or the brand of your furniture. Rachel and I had decided to have our wedding ceremony in the community center where my mother attended her quilting group. The simple venue meant more to us than any expensive reception hall because it represented our family's journey toward authentic values and genuine relationships. The insurance investigator, Mr. Thompson, I said, told me that our family's cooperation and accountability helped them develop new programs for families facing medical financial crises. Sometimes making mistakes leads to helping other people avoid similar problems. Emma was starting her nursing program in January, with financial support from our family's collective efforts to rebuild and move forward together. Her loyalty during our crisis had earned her a permanent place in our family structure. The most important lesson, Sarah said thoughtfully, is that love means being honest with people, even when the truth is painful. We almost lost everything by trying to protect each other from reality. Jake stood up and walked to a small bookshelf in the corner of the living room. He returned with a handwritten journal that he'd been keeping during his recovery. I want to read something I wrote about last year's Thanksgiving, he said, opening the journal carefully. November 28th was the day I learned that my family loved me enough to save my life, even when it meant sacrificing things that seemed important to them. He read about his gratitude for Emma's courage in seeking help, his parents' willingness to spend money they couldn't afford for his psychiatric treatment, and my decision to prioritize family healing over personal revenge. The money you spent on my birthday party, he concluded, was actually money you spent saving my life. I understand now that love sometimes looks different than we expect it to. As the afternoon sun set behind the apartment complex, we cleaned up our simple Thanksgiving meal together, each person contributing to the work, just as we'd learned to contribute to solving our family's problems. Next year, Rachel said, we'll be in our own home, planning our first Christmas as a married couple. And I'll be in my second year of the counseling program, Jake added, hopefully helping other families avoid the kind of crisis we went through. The house payments, David said, will be finished in 6.5 years. By then, Sarah and I will be debt-free and able to help with grandchildren's college funds. Grandchildren? Sarah asked hopefully. Rachel blushed and squeezed my hand. Not quite yet, but someday. As my family laughed and planned for a future built on honesty and mutual support, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. Last year's devastating Thanksgiving dinner had revealed the lies and desperation that nearly destroyed us. This year's celebration represented the healing and growth that came from facing consequences together. The most important thing I learned, I said as we gathered our coats to leave, is that justice doesn't always mean punishment. Sometimes justice means accountability, restitution, and the opportunity to become better people. Jake hugged me tightly. Thank you for not giving up on us, Hilton. Thank you for showing us that love includes holding people accountable for their choices, Emma added. And thank you for proving that families can survive anything if they're willing to tell the truth and work together toward solutions. As Rachel and I drove home to our condo, I thought about the question I wanted to ask the people who might hear this story. When your family faces a crisis that tests everything you believe about loyalty, love, and justice, what would you choose? Would you prioritize protecting people from consequences, or would you insist on accountability as the foundation for genuine healing? Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone you love and demanding that they face the truth about their choices? How did you balance compassion with the need for justice and change? If you've experienced family betrayal or financial abuse, what helped you rebuild trust and move forward together? What advice would you give to other families facing similar crises? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others find it. Subscribe to hear more stories about families overcoming crisis through honesty and accountability. And share this story with someone who might benefit from understanding that love sometimes requires difficult choices. Thank you for listening to our family's journey from deception to healing. May you find the courage to choose truth and accountability in your own relationships, even when it's the hardest path to take. Remember that every family crisis is also an opportunity for growth, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior while offering support for positive change. Until next time, choose honesty, demand accountability, and never give up on the possibility that broken families can heal and become stronger than they ever were before.